When examining Sean Diddy Combs' current legal situation, there's certainly no shortage of details to discuss, particularly regarding his time behind bars. It's almost surreal to recall that at one point, there were discussions about him being placed under house arrest or even allowed to remain in his luxurious Miami estate. But as we now know, neither of those options came to pass. Instead, P. Diddy remains incarcerated, having been held at the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, in Brooklyn since his arrest in September 2024 following a federal indictment. The charges against him include racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud or coercion, and transportation for prostitution. It's important to emphasize that Diddy has consistently denied these allegations. Initially, they surfaced in civil lawsuits, which he dismissed, and now, in the federal case, he has formally entered a plea of not guilty. He has yet to be convicted of any crime. Diddy was taken into custody at the Park Hyatt in New York City by Homeland Security agents. From there, he was transported directly to MDC Brooklyn, a facility often referred to simply as MDC, which is how we'll reference it moving forward. His legal team immediately pushed for his release on bond, even proposing that he be transferred to a different detention center in Essex County, New Jersey. Their argument was that MDC was unsuitable for pretrial detention, citing concerns about overcrowding, violence, and staffing shortages. Mark Agnifilo, one of Diddy's attorneys, has been vocal about the facility's troubled history. He claims that in the months leading up to Diddy's arrest, 2 inmates were killed, 4 others died by suicide over the past 3 years, and 6 staff members had faced criminal charges in the last 5 years. Needless to say, Agnifilo painted a grim picture of the conditions at MDC. To provide deeper insight into this facility, we'll later hear from Dr. Dwayne Hendricks, who served as a warden at MDC and can offer first-hand knowledge about its operations. Initially, Diddy's legal team proposed house arrest at his Miami mansion, but the judge swiftly rejected that idea. They then suggested an alternative: confinement in an Upper East Side apartment under strict supervision. The proposed conditions included 2 live-in guards, a 3rd station downstairs, and no access to phones or the internet except for pre-approved communications with his legal team or vetted family members. Agnifilo argued that these measures were even stricter than remaining in jail, insisting there was zero chance Diddy would act violently if released. Despite these efforts, the judge denied bail multiple times, leaving Diddy at MDC. His time there began with a period on suicide watch, a standard precaution for high-profile or at-risk inmates, involving close monitoring to prevent self-harm. After being cleared, he was moved to a protective custody unit, which houses individuals requiring extra security, such as prominent detainees or those vulnerable to threats. Interestingly, Diddy shared this unit temporarily with Sam Bankman-Fried, the convicted FTX founder serving time for fraud and money laundering. Eventually, Diddy was transferred to general population, where reports emerged about his interactions with fellow inmates. Some accounts claim other prisoners befriended him, even performing small favors like making his bed or sharing snacks. There were also allegations that Diddy traded commissary items, using canned goods as a form of currency. One particularly notable accusation involved Diddy allegedly using other inmates' phone accounts to avoid detection by authorities. Prosecutors claim he contacted at least 8 different inmates to access their accounts, possibly to influence witnesses or manipulate public perception ahead of his trial. In court filings, they accused him of orchestrating social media campaigns to taint the jury pool and leaking materials he believed would help his case. Other reports painted a picture of Diddy struggling with the harsh realities of incarceration. Around the holidays, a source close to him told the Daily Mail that he found the experience a nightmare, though he reportedly used meditation techniques to cope. There were also claims that he feared being poisoned, though experts suggest such concerns were likely unfounded given the controlled nature of prison food services. When questioned about Diddy's condition or any medical visits, his attorney, Mark Agnifilo, declined to comment, as did the Federal Bureau of Prisons, citing privacy and security reasons. Visually, Diddy's appearance has changed dramatically since his arrest. Observers, including Law and Crime's Elizabeth Milner, noted he appeared astonishingly thin and had visibly grayed, differences captured in courtroom sketches. As for his upcoming trial, a recent court order revealed that Diddy will be allowed to wear civilian clothing in court. Specifically, up to 5 button-down shirts, 5 pairs of pants, 5 sweaters, 5 pairs of socks, and 2 pairs of laceless shoes. However, at the end of each day, He'll return to his standard issue MDC jumpsuit and jailhouse cot. To shed more light on Diddy's experience at MDC, especially as someone accustomed to opulent mansions, we'll now turn to Dr. Dwayne Hendricks, a former warden and correctional officer at the facility, for his expert perspective.
Well, I'm sure it was a total shock to him. Obviously, there were reports that he came back to New York because he was going to turn himself in. So he knew there was going to be some sort of law enforcement contact, especially with the courts and the processing. But I don't think in his mind he didn't was not going to be held. I think in his mind he was going to turn himself in and then get booked and then get bail and then go back home and spend some time and prepare for trial. But I think he was definitely shocked in the sense of being arrested at a hotel after spending the day before at a park, just kind of hanging out in Central Park there in New York. Um, so the initial phase for him was definitely shocking. Going, like you said, going from two several thousand feet mansions in LA and in Miami, Florida, to a 6 by 8, 8 by 8 cell. By yourself, trying to figure out, okay, wow, these guys picked me up. I didn't think they were going to do that. So there was a process of, him being on suicide watch and then doing a threat assessment to see if he could be housed outside of the special housing unit. So I could imagine those first few days, especially the first 3 to 4 days before he got settled in, was a total shock to him. And to his credit, although we heard some reports of, him kind of, being a little upset about the food and the conditions, but to his credit, he did find his footing, over these last several months while he was awaiting trial.
Diddy's attorneys were saying, "Oh, the conditions are terrible. It's not suitable for anyone to be there." What do you think about the conditions there?
Well, over several years, going all the way back to the 90s, there have been several different scandals at the facility, starting back in the early 90s with the mafia case where there were staff that were being compromised by, mafia bosses and bringing in contraband and different things of that nature, to a captain and staff abusing inmates on the elevator, to a correctional officer getting pregnant by an individual who was awaiting retrial for murdering two undercover cops in Staten Island, and then to just several situations that's happened there through the years. The place is 1 million square feet. You have an east building and a west building, so there's been a lot of things said and done, well documented about the place. However, one thing I will say, having worked there 3 years myself, you have highly dedicated individuals there to try to take care of business. And then every now and then there's just something that happens at MDC Brooklyn that brings negative attention to the institution. But when you're talking about housing, upwards of 3,500 inmates a day, feeding them, providing medical care, security, and all those different things. So things can happen, but unfortunately now, they don't have that many inmates in the building, and for a person like P Diddy, he's not housed with what we call killers and dealers on the sixth and seventh floor in the west building. He's over in the east side in a more uh, relaxed atmosphere, with maybe 20 other individuals whose crimes that they have allegedly committed aren't anything serious enough to where he would have to be looking over his back on a day-to-day basis. But like to your point, yes, there has been issues at that facility throughout the years. But I will say, having been there myself, and sometimes questioning like, what are we doing? But at the same time, there are dedicated people there to keep people safe, and I think that's what they're doing there right now with him. So.
According to reports, he was nervous that people were potentially poisoning his food. And I'd like to know your opinion on this.
No, the food is prepared, in a jail setting like that. The food is prepared, days in advance because, you have to put foods on carts and then take it over to the unit. And then they have small, we call kitchenettes in each pod. And that food is warmed up and they're put in trays. So, an elaborate plan like that, so many people would have to be involved. And there's thousands of meals that are being prepared across the country in federal and state and local prisons and jails across the country. And one of the things that you haven't really heard of is anyone really getting sick from the food because, again, if you want to lose your institution, if you don't provide good food or at least adequate food and adequate medical care, those are the two quickest ways to cause riots or cause a lot of problems in your facilities. Now, again, is this food like 5 star? Is this something that you're going to go like, hey, I want to go to jail so I can get a jail meal tonight? No, you're not going to do that. But it's going to be palatable enough to where you can consume it without worrying about either being ill or someone trying to take you out. I think a part of that was maybe paranoia on his part. And again, I have no idea about his drug use other than reports that I've heard in terms of his possible defense and different things of that nature. And maybe that was some mental paranoia that was going on initially when he got first arrived at the facility. And again, being confined, think about you have your own plane, you have your own chef, you have a spa. From what I understand, he had a spa in one of his homes where he can get massages and relax and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden now you're told when to eat, when to sleep. You can't move, you can't pick up a phone when you want to. So I think those are elements of, possibly having a little bit of paranoia at the initial phases of him being at the institution.
Let's dive into that. Early in his detention, he spent time in solitary confinement on suicide watch before transitioning to the general inmate population. What differences would he have experienced between those two environments?
Well, again, especially with the high profile nature of his case, who he is, and especially being similar to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, you know, I can tell you that up until the time, obviously, we knew that Epstein was in special housing up until the time he committed suicide, and Ghislaine Maxwell was also in special housing. However, she has some different protocols, I think, to make sure that if she had any suicidal ideation, that staff will be immediately will be able to respond to any issues that she may be having or had. And I think what the agency, and that was at MCC New York as far as Epstein, but like I was saying earlier, with it having a million square feet, and the population being as low as it is, after they were able to do a threat assessment, kind of look at his mental and all of that, they were able to put him in a housing unit where we would consider putting ex cops or cops who may have been arrested for whatever, being compromised or corrupt, and putting them with, inmates that are being charged with sex offenses. And typically, you don't want to put cops in a normal general population unit because obviously they could be running into people they've seen before on the streets. So you don't want to have that. And also, some sex offenders, I mean, they just have a hard time walking on any compound or any jail. So that being said, they were able to transition him from the special housing unit after a short period of time, probably a week or two, and put him in a unit where he could go about doing his business, preparing for trial. However, I will say, if he is found guilty, he will then get the real experience of what prison life will be like, because at that point there will be no catering to his individual needs, so to speak. So
Some of the reports were that he had other inmates making his bed for him, or that he was using the phone privileges of other inmates. And these allegations were so that he could use their phone and it wouldn't be recorded, and they wouldn't, the prosecutors wouldn't then listen to P. Diddy's recordings of his own, recordings. What do you think about his relations with other inmates?
well, I think after the initial phase of being in jail and like, okay, this is my environment, this is where I'm going to have to live, and I'm going to have to get focused to prepare for trial, and hopefully being able to get, be found out guilty and go home. But in the meantime, this is my environment. So I think you always have a couple of individuals on the unit that's going to welcome inmates on the pod or on the floor or in the detention center or wherever location that may be. And again, inmates use their commissary as currency. Some reports that he was bartering cans of tuna for favors, and that's what inmates do. I mean, they don't have cash, so they barter, and maybe some of the inmates have respect for him for his music or the way his business acumen, and maybe they're trying to get up to him saying, hey, I'll make your bed for you. If you can help, I got a cousin that wants to get in the music business. Not that I don't know how many people that's really going to help Diddy out right now in the music business because of his current situation. But inmates are always trying to exchange favors, or maybe this person just likes them and say, hey, I want to do this for you because I know you're so stressed out. I mean, you see, it's whatever happens in society, it happens behind the walls. It just happens in their own little framework of how they go about living their lives and assimilating to that culture. And again, he's not in a unit where you're probably going to find a lot of shanks, what we call homemade weapons and different things of that nature. So it's more to me, it's more of like a camp setting because it's open bay, bunk bed style unit. So the confines of where he is a little bit more friendlier, I believe, than if he was actually in a more traditional detention unit.
We can see visually that Diddy himself looks so much different than when he first went in. I mean, he had dark hair and now he's come out. He's much thinner. He's got white or gray hair. He is not looking like the Diddy we all saw in the magazines. So, what do you make of that? Him changing his appearance so much? Is it just the wear and tear or the stress behind bars?
I think it's all those things you just said. I always tell people when you put on that uniform, that jumpsuit, no matter what color it is, and you're wearing somebody else's underwear that 15 other people wore 10 years ago. I mean, it does change you. And as a warden, I would have like a crowd of new inmates, maybe 15 or 20 at a time, every couple of weeks when they bring in new prisoners, and I would just talk to them about, you know, getting your mind right, getting your head space in a good place and connecting with family because it does change you. And we're talking about somebody's appearance. I mean, one, they're not eating the same diet. Two, we don't have hair dye. I know, and I'm not saying he dyed his hair, but obviously he must have been because if he went gray within 3 months, then, obviously he probably had the best cosmetology folks, helping them, estheticians and masseuses and, physical trainers and that kind of thing, kind of keeping him young and healthy and strong because he has a lot of energy, based on what I've seen through the years. I mean, this guy has just had a lot of energy. He's a hard worker. And then all of a sudden now you don't have a studio to go to. You don't have business meetings. You're not doing those things that you've been doing for 30, 40 years. It will take a quick toll on you. And so, I mean, that's kind of what it is. You pull the curtain back and you take some of these resources from a person, especially at his age. Uh, then obviously you're going to have a person losing a little bit of weight and looking a little bit older. Um, and then two, is he really getting the rest? I mean, they get this little small mattress, one little pillow that really don't have much feather in it, one small blanket, unless somebody's going to allow you to use their blanket. I mean, depending on if he likes to be warm or cold or whatever. So it just your whole life changes, and so hopefully he is staying in a good mental space to try to fight for his freedom, and then we'll see about his guilt or innocence based on what the jury says after everybody hears the evidence, and but I'm not surprised at all. And if he does get out, probably within about 6 months, he'll probably go back to looking just like he looked before because he'll have he may or may not have all the resources that he had before, depending on how much money he's going to lose or has had to spend on his legal defense and what kind of business partnerships he'll have moving forward. But at least if he is found not guilty, he'll have his freedom. So
Diddy's jail saga continues as his trial approaches. Subscribe now for all the latest updates. We'll be breaking down every development. Who do you think will win this case? Drop your predictions below. See you next time.